I'm a big fan of foldable phones. However, they are still hard to recommend, which is why I'm wondering if Apple can change that. Not with the iPhone Air, obviously, but you know what I'm talking about. In front of me, I've got the Samsung Z, and we do say Z in the UK. Samsung says Z, it doesn't matter. Z Fold 7, the Google Pixel 10 Pro Fold, which is a very long name, but a very good phone. Honor Magic V5, Jimmy Choo inspired Honor flip phone, no idea why, and a Motorola Razr that's made out of wood and which also flips like that. Very interesting phones, but expensive and difficult to recommend over regular phones because you have to be a very specific person to get the most out of something like this. If you are that person, you will love phones like the Z Fold 7. But for everyone else, it's a bit tricky because they are very expensive and you have to have a reason to do that or to do that. Apple apparently, and everything I'm about to say in this video is based on rumor, we have to bear that in mind, but Apple this year is apparently entering this game and they're doing it slightly differently, which gives me hope that they might make a big dent in the foldable game. It may not be for you, but it might be, and I think there's a lot to talk about. It could get spicy in the comments. This is where I stand on foldables. Now, there are two different types. We have a flip like this, which is very popular for a certain audience. It's not for me. I've always said that I'd love to have the reason or the need for something like the Z Flip, but it just doesn't work for me. But I know a lot of people love the one-handedness of it. The fact that you can use the main camera system as a selfie. It's very much a selfie cam. It's very good in that respect. And it's very pocketable or baggable, whatever you need to do with it. So you get that type, which lots of different manufacturers are making and have been making for years. And then you get the big one. You get the foldable, which does that. And again, lots of different manufacturers have made these phones for quite a while. Arguably, Samsung is the godfather of this part of the industry. But the problem with these phones is that they are fantastic. They're really, really impressive, particularly phones like the Z Fold 7 and the Honor Magic V5 or the V6 as it is now. They're thin, they have a fantastic front screen, and they have this massive internal canvas for doing lots of multitasking and creative stuff. They're wonderful. However, we went from this, which is I think the Z Fold 3 or 4 maybe, but it had a very narrow front screen, which made it quite tricky to use, which meant you did that a lot, which sounds good because it means you're using that big internal display. But the downside was that narrow front screen was just a bit too narrow, which meant you're kind of always doing that, which made that annoying, and it wasn't a great experience. Brands like Samsung and Google have recognized that, and Honor to be fair, and they have widened the front screen, which is great because suddenly you've got this really, you know where this is going. You get this fantastic front screen which you can type on and it's not annoying. The problem with that is that you have less reason to do that, which means you've spent £2,000 probably, or maybe let's say 1,600 quid at the bare minimum on a phone that you're not using 100% of. You're just using that front screen. That tends to be the way that I fall into using foldable phones. I tend to use the front screen way more than that. I have to force myself to open it, which seems a bit silly. That is the problem that I have with foldables, and it's really annoying because they're so good. They are so, so good. However, I think Apple has potentially, this is a rumor, remember, come up with a solution. But there are some question marks around it. Okay, so what's Apple doing later this year with the iPhone? I've scoured all of the rumors, I've read all of the Reddit thread, I haven't really. I've just put together the key rumors about this, and the most interesting thing, I think, is the fact that apparently Apple is going to split the iPhone launch. So in September, we're going to get the iPhone 18 Pro and Pro Max, apparently, and then we'll have to wait until, I guess, spring 2027 to get the regular iPhone 18. I think that's a fantastic idea. We don't need brand new phones every year. Wait a bit, that's absolutely fine. I don't know what that means for the iPhone Air. I hope we get an update to this as well because it's a fantastic phone. It is my main device now. I've gone back to it. I made a video about it, which we'll link to at the end of this one. No idea what's happening with that, but the reason they're splitting with this, apparently, is because they're making way for something in September. And that something, again, apparently is going to be called the iPhone Ultra, which is going to be their first, can't even get my words out, I'm so excited, is going to be their first foldable. Some of the rumoured specs, it's going to have a 7.7 to 7.8 inch inner display, which will have no crease. That's a big thing for foldables. For me, I don't really care, but people do get fed up with the fact that these devices have creases when you open them up. Some of them don't. Well, they all have creases, but for instance, the Oppo Find N6, which I reviewed very recently, almost doesn't have a crease, but apparently the iPhone foldable, it will not have a crease at all. It's going to be made from titanium. It will be powered by the A20 Pro chip. It won't have Face ID. It'll have Touch ID on the power button. There'll be no telephoto lens, just a 48 megapixel main and a 48 megapixel ultra wide. And that's pretty much all we know in terms of the specs. But the one spec which is very interesting and which would in theory separate the iPhone Ultra from all of these is that it will look a little bit like this. This is my passport, which is, it's seen better days, but the rumour is that Apple is going to have a foldable of that size, roughly, which is really interesting because it's very different to what Samsung's doing, and it's very different to what Google's doing. It's very different to the flip phones that we've got as well. So the question is, does this solve the problems that I have with foldables? Possibly. The two problems that I have with foldable phones, the first one was the price. So the first question is, would a passport-sized iPhone fold, would it solve the price problem? Probably not, because again, if the rumours are true, we're looking at $2,000 to $2,500. It's not going to be a cheap device, is it? It can't be, because these aren't cheap devices, and Apple isn't going to come in and say, here's a 1,200 quid foldable. They might do, who knows, but I think that's very unlikely. So it's not going to solve the price problem. However, in fairness, for all of these phones, most people get their devices via carriers. So yeah, they have like a subsidy that they pay their carrier, and that means they pay a monthly fee rather than a great big upfront $2,000 price for the phone. So maybe that isn't as big a deal as I'm making it out to be. The second issue that I had with foldables, remember, is that you have to have a reason to do that. And I think the more that I've pretended, I've not done this too much, I promise, but the more that I've pretended that my passport is a phone that does that, the more I've realised that it's really enticing, because firstly, that feels like a BlackBerry. It takes me back to my BlackBerry days, where presumably there won't be a physical keyboard, but it's very usable. That's a very usable sized screen. And if I do that, I suddenly get this bigger screen, which would be fantastic for watching YouTube videos on, or just digging into email a bit more and maybe having a better side-by-side multitasking experience. That is immediately more interesting, I think. I love that idea. The other thing is the story behind it. That's the one thing that separates Apple from a lot of these other brands. They're very good at developing a story behind their products, the reason that you should buy it. This is the narrative behind this thing that we've made, which links to you. There's something in this story that you'll think, that's me, and that's my problem, or whatever. And they've done that for decades, basically. It's why the Mac is so popular. It's why the iPhone took over the world, basically. And it's why things like the AirPods are just an utterly genius piece of design. It's just, they just know what they're doing when it comes to telling the story behind products. And for this to work, if it's true, it has to have a really compelling story behind it. Not just to go for this and to make it your main device, but also to make sure that it doesn't cannibalize things like the iPad. That's the obvious thing here, isn't it? If I opened that up and put it against the iPad mini, it's not that much smaller, which means Apple has to develop a story that doesn't suggest that this is better than the iPad. That is so tricky. I wouldn't want that job. It's why I'm doing this and I'm not working for Apple, but that's a big task. So guys, it's over to you. I want to hear from you in the comments. Would you buy the iPhone Ultra if it exists? And if so, why? And if not, why? Get involved. I will as well. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, you know what to do. You might want to do that actually, because I've just found out I'm going to WWDC for the first time ever. And boy, will I make the most of that.